you know, when I think about this situation, I think a lot of families are wanting to build resilience. You know, how can we come out of this situation and manage the situation and again have enhanced well-being, right? So be rooted and grounded in good psychological functioning and emotional functioning. And how do we do this as a family when this is an incredibly stressful time for a lot of people for a number of different reasons? You've got children who are distance learning, parents who are now finding themselves in the teacher position, right, to oversee that distance learning. And at the same time, they may have to also work. And we've talked about how difficult and challenging that can be to try and work from home, which may be something new, and then also oversee distance learning for maybe not even just one child, but two children who are at two different grade levels and using, you know, 10 different apps in their day to get through the curriculum. And at the same time, maybe having anxiety about your own physical health, worrying about parents and grandparents and their health and well-being during this crisis, and financial stressors, which has been an issue for a number of people who have lost their jobs or who found a reduction in revenue in their income and businesses as a result of the stay-at-home order.
So, you know, resilience is not about pretending things are okay.
Right.
And resilience is not, I think, about pretending things are easy. And I think sometimes people forget about that. Resilience is about the ability to see the other side. And it's also not about it looking pretty either. And so I think being able to show that to our kids is extremely important. Right. And having them see that process of like what that looks like. Does it mean cutting coupons before we go to the store and showing that, you know what, finances are hard. And of course, in a socially and developmentally appropriate way, they don't need to know the level of poverty, but this is how we do it. Right. And that really builds grit for our kids. That's resilience building. Or mom and dad are having an argument right now. You don't have to hide that, but you can show what, you know, collaborative problem solving looks like, and that mom and dad can have an argument, but they make it out the other side. That's like resilience building, right? Or, you know what, mom is actually crying right now because she's sad, but this is how she comes out of it. And again, that's not an emotional breakdown because that creates anxiety for kids, but that mom can have real emotions. So I think, you know, to answer your questions, it's about authenticity in whatever way it looks like. And that builds, I think, resilience for kids, especially through this.
Right. And it sounds like what you're saying, that by going through it and having them watch you go through it, you're actually modeling emotional problem solving.
Exactly. Right. And in essence, having them even do it with you. If they can, if there's anything that's like the possibility. So the cutting the coupons, or if you have some older kids, if they can learn how to balance a budget without actually seeing your finances. So we have $300 today, like, or for the week. Can you help me? That's building resilience.
Right, right.
Yeah.
We have a question. Shauna said, my daughter's school is making Zoom calls optional. She's in 7th grade. How much should I encourage her to join those calls with her teachers?
You want to take that first?
Sure. I mean, I think to check in with her, see what her level of comfort is with joining those calls. Again, one of the things I said when we started is that a lot of students are feeling disconnected from their teachers and from their peers. And so this might be a way for her to engage and connect with others. And that might be beneficial. But I would not say, if it's optional, I would be collaborative in your approach to deciding what to do and how it might, talk to her about how it might be helpful. And then if she does decide to join in on the Zoom call, to check in with her in terms of how that felt. And is that something you'd want to do again and process the experience with her? What do you think, Dr. Mihalas?
So some of the feedback, I would agree with Dr. Wilson wholeheartedly, and I just would piggyback on that some students, especially in middle school, have been reporting that they feel left out on the Zoom calls because children are chatting behind the scenes. And as we know, there is some type of relational aggression that happens that teachers can't pick up on. And so even if it's about the academic course material, because kids know what to do, it's still that some other kids can be left out, especially if they have social pragmatic issues or other things. And so I would just also check in with your daughter to make sure that she's comfortable even engaging in the nuances of academic Zoom chat with other peers.
Yes. And if there's issues related to the academics and she has questions about the material that she has to do, maybe arranging a one-on-one Zoom chat with her teacher. That may be something. And if she's missing the connection with specific peers, maybe arranging like a Zoom call with those specific peers that she's missing. Okay. You're welcome. Any other questions?
Just to further extrapolate on that, if she's hesitant to reach out to her teachers, again, I don't know the particular reasons or so forth, but if she's open to telling you some of the questions, the other option is you could bridge that gap for her so she doesn't lose out on the academic material.
Yeah, I think that's really important. That's really good. So I'm going to see if any other questions come in, but I do want to piggyback on that conversation we started about resilience. And it kind of reminds me of, a well-known psychologist, Martin Seligman, talking about the kind of the 3 Ps that kind of get in the way of us getting to the other side and becoming resilient. And he talks about that in terms of personalization, permanence, and pervasiveness. And that's the idea. The personalization aspect is the idea that people have a tendency to self-blame, right? It's like, if only I had saved up enough money for bad times, things would be better. If only I was a better parent, the distance learning would be going better. I'd be able to better manage my child's anxiety. And that can actually interfere with kind of working through the resilience. And when you think about the permanence, is the idea that this is a bad situation. I think we can all acknowledge that, this is uncomfortable and it's stressful. And again, it's anxiety provoking. And there's a lot of anger associated with the situation. And even people are angry about how it's being handled. But the idea of permanence is the idea that things are bad and they will always be bad, right? And that nothing is going to change. And if you have that mindset, it can also exacerbate the anxiety and prevent individuals from really acknowledging the fact that things are going to get better and having that outlook. And that actually helps people to have some hope as they kind of work through this challenge. And the third thing the third P is the pervasiveness of the issue, that some people will see that, the situation is bad. Maybe there's one thing that's really particularly hurtful. Maybe the person has lost their job and now all of a sudden it's bad that I lost my job. It's bad that my kids are at home. It's bad that I have to be in the house. It's like nothing is good. So they kind of generalize the bad situation to all aspects of their lives. And I think one of the benefits of kind of being in psychotherapy, if people are feeling overwhelmed and feeling, excessively sad or anxious, and they feel like it's interfering with their ability to function, is that it allows us to kind of process through those feelings and really kind of challenge some of those thoughts that individuals are having.
I think that kind of pervasiveness related to the negativity of the situation, in positive psychology, which Seligman is related to, one of the techniques that is very helpful for that is a gratitude list. And I think that, the listeners can take home today that is very poignant to do right now with your family or in a group chat that anyone may be linked to right now to decrease solitude, is a 3-a-day gratitude list. And with your family, you can post this on a board, or if people don't want to share it, they can do it privately, but that kind of decreases the solitude aspect. But you basically just list, as basic as it is, 3 things you're thankful for. And the research indicates that when you do this, it decreases hopelessness, it decreases depression, it decreases anxiety, and it increases hope, which is what Dr. Wilson was referring to, which is, again, directly causally linked to resilience. And so it's a really easy thing to do. It takes like less than 15 seconds.
Right.
And it's very helpful.
Right. And I think that's a way of kind of caring for ourselves and our children, especially if you can involve children in that process.
Right.
And people will do it around the dinner table, you know, go around the dinner table and say those 3 things that they're grateful for, or say that one thing that they're grateful for. And that kind of keeps top of mind that in the midst of this difficult situation, there are things that we have to be thankful for. And I think that people have found that very, very helpful. And our kids have been pointing out that, you know, all of the good things that are coming out of this, right? And that also helps to kind of to do that as a family. You know, what are you enjoying? I know that this is a difficult time, and we want to open up that conversation and give children a place to process what it is that they're feeling, and to just be heard and just acknowledge the discomfort, but also to give them a place to voice, you know, what is it about the situation that you found to be helpful, right, or beneficial. And people have talked about blessings in the midst of this challenge. And it might be, you know, we get to Zoom with our family more often, or I get to spend more time with you. I've had one of the clinicians that was on a call earlier this week said, you know, she has 2 teenagers, and she said, I went for a family walk, and we would never have gone for a family walk with our 2 teenagers, you know, in the middle of the week. Right. And so that would be something to be grateful for. Right. And I think people are finding those little things that bring them joy in the midst of, you know, a difficult situation. Does anyone have any other specific questions? Because we can continue talking about coping strategies. I don't see any other questions right now, but yes.
I see one here, actually. It's as an anonymous. It says, Zoom meetings are great, but at the same time are tiring for my son. My son is in 1st grade, and I can see he misses the human energy of his class and make him sad. What can I do?
Oh, that's a really good one. And I think I think people are getting kind of fatigued with the technology. You know, they're on their screens doing these distance learning activities, and then being on these Zoom calls, and particularly for younger kids, and a lot of times it's just not developmentally appropriate to have, you know, a 5-year-old sitting in front of a screen for hours on end. And so I think a conversation with the teachers and about the appropriateness of that, and whether some of that is optional, but finding other ways for your son to connect with peers. And one of the things that kids have done is that, you know, you can't obviously be close to other kids, but you can arrange to drive by a peer's house, right? And you kind of wave out the window, or you have a discussion from across the street, or you drop off a care package to someone. So you do see the person face to face, but it's not across a screen, right? And so they find different ways to kind of engage and connect that's outside of kind of the Zoom and video conferencing realm.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have much to add to that. I would agree that finding the human to human contact in whichever way that is. I know a lot of people are doing promenade drive-bys, which is like very cool, where they will, if the teacher allows it, they drive by the teacher's house. If they have friends, they drive by and do a parade. I also know that some people, if they are not health compromised, are doing social distancing meetings where they will, you know, take, like 1st graders will take their scooters and they will do 6 to 8 feet scootering. They will have some type of play date with 6 to 8 feet, with 6 to 8 feet distancing, again, 1st graders, so that they can have that social interaction, which really is important at that. That's really when we are developing that kind of play and that social and language connection.
Yes. I think another thing I've seen people do is they arrange for like 6 to 8 feet picnics, where they each have their picnic blankets. They're 6 to 8 feet apart, and they bring their lunch, so they're less inclined to kind of run over and hug and jump on each other, but they sit and they can have a conversation 6 to 8 feet apart, but they stay on their picnic blankets. Right. And if you're kind of in the Los Angeles or California area now, the weather's beautiful. So it's a perfect time to do that. So I see Dr. Daniel Franklin is on the line, on the call, and he's asking, what are some books you are recommending to your clients? Dr. Mihalas?
So one book that I'm recommending is, I'm trying to think of the name of the book. It's by Pema Chodron, and she is a Buddhist monk, and it's related to resilience in hard times, but I can actually not think of the name of the book, but it came out in the past 2 years. And every chapter gives a new mindfulness meditation to focus on and how to roll with very, very difficult times. And it was actually given to me, surprisingly, 2 months before the pandemic. So it was and then I am also recommending a book called Mantras Made Easy by Boyle. And the reason I'm recommending this is that I'm really working with mindfulness and being in the moment and trying to work through managing moment to moment focus, because many people that I'm working with, both children, adolescents, and adults, are so scared about what's going to be happening literally like 2 months from now, next week. And the reality is we don't know.
Yes.
And so if we can literally live moment to my moment, and I know that's been a catchphrase for the last 2 years here in Los Angeles, but now it actually is very, very real. Mm-hmm. We can, calm down our systems. Mm-hmm. We can rest and be very real about where we are right now. Mm-hmm. That book, Mantras Made Easy, is really helping people who are experiencing a profound existential anxiety right now.
Okay. Thank you. That's really helpful. And there have been a number of articles that have come out that are really short kind of guides to kind of how to get through anxiety, challenging times, to reduce stress. And I think those have been helpful as well. And I will pop those in the chat before we leave so that people have links to those resources. And you can also email us. We'll also give everyone access to our email addresses, and I can send a link, perhaps a Google Drive, of all of those resources that people can access that they might find helpful.
Yes. Welcoming the unwelcome. That is exactly it. Thank you very much. That's right.
Someone popped in the response. Yep. Okay.
Children. That's right. Thank you.
Yay. All right. So I thought maybe a good time to kind of talk about some coping strategies. What are some things that families can do to enhance their well-being during this time? We talked about having conversations, and I think it's important, particularly with families that have more than one child, to give each child their one-on-one time, right? Because their needs are going to be different. And that could be, sitting on the front step with a bowl of ice cream. It could be going for an individual walk. But I think it's important to give children an opportunity to share their feelings and their experiences. I think that's important, and to talk about what it is that they're feeling. And then I think also self-care. I think we haven't really touched on that, but as adults, I think it's important for us to engage in a lot of self-care, because we know that when parents are anxious, scared, and irritable, it directly impacts our ability to parent, right? And it impacts the way in which we parent and how we respond to the stress, the child's response to stress, right? And so I think it's really important to engage in self-care, and we can talk about what that might look like. Dr. Mihalas.
I'm trying to think where we start self-care, or we start with I'm going to start with self-care. And the reason I'm thinking that is that, if the mama bear, the papa bear, the grandma bear, whoever is not grounded and being able to hold, then the trickle-down effect is quite negative. Self-care, I think, can look very different depending on, the culture of the family and the nature of, is it a collectivist family? Is it an individualist family? So, I want to couch that because self-care, again, is really individualistic in that way. So spiritually, a lot of people that I have been working with are used to going to church or going to temple or going to mosque and so forth. And so it's been an interesting dialogue of how are you having your spiritual needs met in that way. So I think looking at that framework is one very interesting thing to talk about, and making sure your self-care, if you're a spiritual or religious person, is being met is very important, both as a parent or teacher, or as your family unit. Are you making sure that's intact or whatever that means, and keeping up with that schedule? Because self-care in that respect, again, spiritualistically and religiously, is very important for a family unit for that time.
Absolutely.
And then moving on as an individual human, like what does self-care look like? I think that really day to day, it's very important for whatever way you can do it, even to carve out 5 minutes, if that's all you can get, to maintain a ritual. And a ritual may be a bathing ritual. A ritual may be a mindfulness moving ritual. A ritual may be your favorite ice cream. But the concept of self-care in itself is giving to yourself so that you can rejuvenate. I think a lot of people think self-care has to be this long ordeal of going to get a massage, but the reality is it's self-healing so that then you can give back and take care of others too. And so really it's just a carving out of time for self. Of course, if you can stretch that out and have more time, that's great. And then self-care is also a collective concept of, if you are co-parenting, for those of us that may be, it's a dyadic, or for those that have a different type of partnering relationship, it may be triadic or whatever the case is, that you collectively in the partnership are caring for one another too. So that you are sitting down with your partner or partners and make sure that you are caring for the relationship. So that may be a back rub, that may be saying, how are you today? And looking eye to eye and having that conversation, because if you're not tending to the relationship, you can't then tend to the full family. And then finally, looking at the full collective, how are you self-caring for the family? Is that a family meal? Is it taking a walk together? Is it watching a movie? Because at the end of the day, everyone is Zooming like we've been talking about. We are telecommuting, we're teletherapying, we're doing all of it. And we're actually missing the joy of the family and the fun of the family. So it's also really important to self-care for the family.
Right. And I think that self-care, particularly with the family, what it does is it also reinforces that need for connection at a time when, again, people are just disconnected from their regular way of life. And that can be enhancing, and that can also improve mood, right? And decrease anxiety and decrease stress when you feel that connection. And again, you feel you have something to be grateful for and something to really feel good about again, in the situation that we're in. Right. And I think also when people are kind of tending to their own self-care, particularly parents, it can feel, for some, I've heard parents say this feels selfish, right? It feels selfish to go for a walk on my own because my kids need me during this time, or my significant other or my spouse needs me during this time. But it's really, like you were saying, important to take that time for self, because that allows you to reduce your level of stress, your level of anxiety, which allows you to better connect with your significant other and your family. And really what you're talking about in terms of self-care, it's really a family systems approach to self-care. That you have to have the individual, the significant others, and the family all paying attention to what it is that they need and maintaining that connection at this point. Right.
So before we go on to what Dr. Wilson mentioned about some actual strategies for the youth, does anyone have any questions? Just want to check in with everyone about anything with this topic.
And also, is this helpful? You know, we've got some people on the line, and is this information that we're sharing helpful? We do want that feedback as well. And if there's any specific questions that you have that you want to ask, of course, we want to answer those as well. Okay, great. All
okay.
right.
So I can't see one chat box, so I'm assuming it's not up. I don't know. I can't tell.
Okay.
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 So there are so many strategies for kids. I'm not sure like the ages of the children that people have on this call. Can anyone just kind of shoot out the ages or roughly like type into the chat box 12?
Right. And if you're a clinician or an educator, the ages of the kids that you might be working with in kind of a Zoom classroom or working with one-on-one, maybe there's a range of students that you work with, and maybe an age range or an age group where you find that they're having specific concerns. That might be helpful for us as well. So we're seeing the range from all the way from 4 to 12.
And then I had an 18 too.
Okay. And I think that 16, 17, 18-year-old group is really important to pay attention to as well, because I think we're more inclined to kind of jump in there and really attend to the needs of the little ones. But those high school seniors are experiencing a great deal of grief right now over, missed graduations and missed a lot of kind of culminating activities. And like you were saying, Dr. Mihalas, that they also need their own individualized support at this time. And talking about, this time may look different than you had kind of anticipated. So what can we do to celebrate the milestones that you're making right now in a different way? And maybe postponing the kinds of celebrations that they thought that they would be having for a later time, even though, again, there's uncertainty over when that can happen and what that will look like.
Okay. So I'll start with the roughly, the younger ages, I think strategies. So for generally all ages, I think it's really important to touch base on a daily basis of, hey, how are you doing? Just across the board. And, if people are saying, I don't feel like talking about it, then you just let it go, and move forward. I think that for the 10 and up, a strategy that can be really helpful is having kind of like a Dropbox. And a Dropbox can be really nice because sometimes kids decide they want to talk about something, but you may be at work at home. You may be unavailable. They may want to drop something on you in the middle of the night, but they're trepidatious about waking you up. And so having like a postal box in the house can really help kids manage their feelings, and you can find out about it. It can also be used in a way that they may not want to talk about it, but they want to tell you. So you can use that Dropbox in a lot of different ways, but it's a really nice strategy of communication. Another thing that can be very helpful for all ages is having like a family meeting, which, I think has been used for time and time again, but you can determine what the family meeting is for. And it's a powwow time for your family to kind of compartmentalize the discussion. So like, we're going to have a 20-minute family meeting and everyone's going to share whatever they feel like. And the rest of the time, we're going to kind of put stuff to the side so that kids don't feel like their parents are constantly asking them how they're doing or wanting to process information. Because I think when everyone's in the same house constantly, kids are like, can we please stop talking about this? Can we please stop checking on me? And I think that overall kids are overwhelmed by how much they're seeing their parents. They're also not used to something like this.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think Shauna asked about, she said that she's working with students with special needs of all ages on Zoom, and that can be particularly challenging because, and special needs can look very different in a number of different kids. Kids are struggling with a number of language-based issues, attention issues, difficulties related to social functioning. And for kids with special needs, a lot of the accommodations and the modifications, the support they were getting was happening at school, and now those things are happening at home. And it's stressful for parents to kind of oversee therapies, occupational therapy or speech and language therapy, or some of the behavioral supports that kids got at school. So that can be very difficult. I think for kids with special needs, it's even more important to have regular communication with educators and the intervention team for that particular child, because you want to be providing information about how your child or a child is responding to this transition to distance learning, what is working, what is not working. Sometimes the Zoom call will not work for some kids with special needs for a number of different reasons. And you have to be attuned to how the child is responding to that change in the way that the curriculum is being implemented. And giving that feedback to teachers. Is there something else that we can do? If this child does not want to participate in Zoom, runs out of the room, then now it's time to have a conversation with the teachers. How else can we provide instruction for this child? Now is the time to be flexible. You know, are there worksheets that we can do? Can we do a one-on-one Zoom call instead of having the whole class? You know, I've seen screens with the gallery view of 20 kids on the screen, which can be overwhelming and highly distracting to kids with attention issues. So there are a number of things that we may have to change, but we have to be providing feedback to teachers because they won't know. A lot of teachers are overwhelmed because they are having to all of a sudden implement a distance learning program that they've never done before. And how do they check in with all of the students and meet the needs of all of these students who are trying to navigate this process in their homes? And so there are a lot of questions, but the communication is going to be key. Teachers need to get feedback, and the curriculum needs to be flexible in a lot of cases so that the needs of that particular child are being met.
I will take the next question. How much should parents push school if kids don't feel like cooperating? This is a little bit of a complicated question because I think it depends on what was the baseline of like, where was your kid at before this happened? Was there resistance about school from the get-go? Was there any type of school refusal prior to this? Are there learning issues? Are there attentional issues? Are there student-teacher relationship issues that your child was already having problems navigating and now they've been exacerbated? You know, as we all know on this call, the academic arena is extremely complicated and there are so many variables at play. And then now we have the pandemic on top of it. Now we have the environmental fit of home that children have to navigate, and they're not contained. There may be peers, their siblings that they may have difficult or not difficult relationships with, so they either don't want to deal with them and they hear them, or they want to play with them and so they have to manage that. And so I think the person that wrote this would want to consider all of those things and determine if it's appropriate to push or not. Because, you know, yeah, it's hard to like kind of determine that. And I think that, you know, consultation around that may be appropriate.
And then again, having a teacher to find out if cooperation was an issue in the school environment before the distance learning came about. So that's important as well. And, you know, we had talked about books that we found helpful. And I think when you're talking about kids with learning challenges, learning differences, language-based difficulties, attention problems, now parents are having to manage a lot of those behaviors and those difficulties at home over an extended period of time. And I know that Dan Franklin is on the call, but his book is particularly helpful in terms of attending to the needs of students with language-based and attention-based difficulties. And now would be a really great time when parents are in the role of educator to really find tools and strategies in order to support their child. So Dr. Franklin, if you're still on the call, if you could put the name of your book and maybe even put a link to where people can get it. I think particularly parents who have kids with learning differences, special needs, it's a really great book that really talks about strategies, but also the importance of the relationship when you're implementing strategies and interventions for kids who have learning challenges.
And then we had someone note that they have a senior in high school missing out on all the grad activities. I have quite a few seniors in this same position, and we have been really working on the grief process around this and not minimizing it. I think minimizing for children and young adults, teenagers, young adults in transition is probably one of the worst things you can do, because everyone's reality right now is theirs. Of course, some people who can't put food on the table, is their reality and very difficult, but someone who's about to culminate from high school, like they've been working 18 years to get here and they're excited either to go to college or to culinary school or whatever their next step is. And that's a very big developmental milestone for them. And even someone who was about to go from middle school to high school, for them, that also is a very big developmental milestone. So I think as parents, it's extremely important to make sure that we honor their grief in this process. And, just logistically and strategically, the things that you can do if they are ready to problem solve is contacting whatever their next step is and what that can look like, again, when they're ready. Is it going to be virtual learning? Are they even able to start where it is in the fall? Because sometime amidst the grief and anxiety, if there are concrete steps and it has that tangible thing, it can really help them feel some kind of sense of security moving forward.
Absolutely.
So I see something in the chat. Dr. Franklin wrote in this one, but I don't know if people can see it, Dr. Wilson.
Oh, is it in the Q&A? Oh.
Yes, in the Q&A.
Okay, if we can put it, let me see if I can pop it in the chat. There we go. Oh, I don't think it's it's not hyperlinked though. Dr. Franklin, maybe if you can put it in the chat instead of the Q&A with the hyperlink. I guess people can cut and paste it too. But the book is Helping Your Child with Language-Based Learning Disabilities, and it's exceptional for people who are working with kids who are struggling in that regard. So I think, we began this conversation and this discussion talking about just the collective anxiety and the collective feelings of overwhelm. But there's also, I think what we're seeing too is a lot of collective empathy. And I think we can move towards kind of collective resilience, right? And, we talked about some strategies, expressing gratitude, helping others, really listening to members of the family, listening to the students we work with, the families that we work with, and, paying attention to our spiritual needs and having that self-care as an individual, as part of a dyad, part of a couple, and then also as a family. Are there other things that people can do to kind of alleviate some of the stress, alleviate some of the anxiety during this time? I'm thinking, obviously people want to reach out for resources. If you're a family who's struggling to put food on the table, then you want to connect with resources that can help you to get your basic needs met. But there are other things that we can do as well to attend to, our physical well-being, making sure we're taking care of our health, making sure we're having a balanced diet is more important than ever. Making sure we're paying attention to how much sleep we're getting, right? Because we know that sleep deprivation affects the immune system, right? It lowers your immune system's ability to function and combat illnesses. And so having adequate sleep, making sure everyone in the family is getting adequate sleep is more important than ever. So those are things that we can do and to be thinking about, right? We often think about mindfulness and prayer and having conversations and being connected, but we also have to take care of our physical health as well. It's probably very important during this time. And what's also important, I think, is, kids are on screens a great deal. And a lot of parents are having the discussion about, should I just abandon the screen time restrictions? Obviously, they're going to be spending more time on screens now because of the distance learning, but you still want to have some restrictions. Wouldn't you agree? Because you don't want them to finish all their distance learning and then spend the next 3 hours on YouTube videos. Right?
Yeah, so I think that it's important for them to have a break from screens.
Yes.
But I also think there's time for them to decompress too.
Yes.
And so what does the decompress mean? Does the decompress mean that they can go outside pending that's safe for them and their health? Does decompress mean that they do some exercise in the house with you, because we know that exercising does decrease anxiety and depression, hands down. But does decompress mean for some kids to do 20 to 30 to even an hour on their screens? And also, does that mean it decompresses you as parents too?
Right.
Because you have to get dinner done. You have to speak with your spouse about finances, whatever the case is. So I think in this period of COVID, it's really important to be patient and accepting of yourself as parents, because if you usually would have this strict adherence to a no screen time rule, that now maybe it's okay to be a little bit more lax about it. And again, to Dr. Wilson's point, yes, it's not like a free-for-all, but it's also like, you know what, it's okay. You do an hour, I need my hour. I actually want to watch a couple, an hour or two of Netflix. Everyone is just going to relax on that, to the point of screens. I think, other things that people can do to continue to take care of themselves is to do physical wellness checks. I know that some people are checking their blood pressure more at home. They are doing mental wellness checks with their partners and friends, making sure that they are not falling into a depression, making sure that every other day they are doing a check-in with their best friend or their mother to ensure that they're not socially isolating. They are doing, questionnaires online, like the Beck Depression Inventory or the Beck Anxiety Inventory, that they can easily do online to ensure that they're not getting into a moderate or clinical range on those measures. And if they are, they're making a commitment to themselves to reach out to a clinician.
And I think that's important, because I think what we're seeing is that we have to social distance, but I think what a lot of people are saying is that social distancing doesn't have to mean social isolation, which can lead to people feeling depressed and feeling hopeless, right? And so I think that's a really important point, to make sure that people are having self-compassion and showing themselves some grace, but also being attuned to where they are emotionally. And if they feel that the anxiety or the depression or the feelings of being overwhelmed are really affecting their daily functioning, that it really is a time to reach out for support. And now there are a lot of telehealth opportunities, right? So they can seek those services and have them presented to them via Zoom or via Doxy or some other format, but they can have those therapy sessions remotely.
Right. And then finally, at the end of the day, like, what are you doing to treat yourself?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where is there that pleasurable component? Like, there is so much pain and suffering happening right here in our local community, in our state, in our country, and in our world. Like, what are you doing to give yourself an iota of pleasure? Because that's what's going to allow us to fuel our soul and then fuel our family and our children, so that we don't sink into a depression or into a panic attack. And so I think that kind of is a final thought for all of us to consider is, where is that pleasurable moment?
It really boils down to, where can you find joy?
Right.
Right. Where can you find joy in the situation?
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So before we end, does anyone have any burning questions that they want to ask before we end? Wow, this hour went by really quickly. Because if not, what we can do is we can give you information where you can reach out to us if you have specific questions. If you didn't feel comfortable kind of asking in a group situation, we can provide our information. Let me just see if I can put up this. Oh, it's not on there. Okay. Let's see. Perhaps Dr. Mihalas, you can put your email address or your website in the chat.
Oh, sure. I'll put my website up.
Okay.
I think I spelled my name right. Oh, that went privately.
Okay.
So maybe you have to do it?
Let's see.
Oh, maybe I do switch over. I don't know what I'm doing. Nope. I don't know what just happened.
Okay. So there, I think our information should be on the screen. Can everybody see that? There are 2 websites in terms of where you can reach us. And then I also put up just the LA County Access Crisis Hotline in case people feel that they are in crisis. It's a place where you can get resources and get immediate counseling support right away. And they can also kind of provide you with a place where you can get ongoing support and help during this time if you feel that you are in crisis. Okay. All right. And I don't think are there any more questions? Dr. Mihalas, did you see? No?
I can't see anymore. So
thank you for having this discussion with me. And I appreciate everyone who showed up for this call today. This was our first ChildNEXUS live event. We're hoping to do more. And if you found it helpful, please reach out to us, give us some feedback. Let us know of any other topics that you want us to talk about or to hear about, to discuss further, because we'd be more than willing to invite other people to join the discussion and have conversations about various topics. Okay, so thank you so much, and
thank you, everyone.
Be safe, stay healthy, and stay strong.
Have a good night. Thank you, Dr. Wilson.
Thank you.